Right, that's Pink, and this is David Nicholls. David, welcome to the studio. Lovely to meet you.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here.
And thanks for being with us. You are on a very, very hectic schedule at the moment. I mean, you were where were you last night?
I was doing a big event at the Royal Festival Hall with Dolly Alderton, which was great fun, but definitely the biggest audience I've ever had, and it was very exciting, very nerve-wracking as well.
Yeah, because you've all these great books and screenwritings and a lot of these, but put you on stage in front of a crowd of humans, and you really get nervous about it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've spent 4 years in a room by myself, and then every 4 or 5 years I come out and meet readers, and I love it. I absolutely love it. But there's no reason why a writer should be able to perform, and so there is an element of anxiety around it as well.
It's so true. Having interviewed writers and even famous movie stars, some of them will argue, I don't need to be good at this.
No, it's
I've given you my new book.
That's the work.
That's the work. That's what I'm meant to be good at.
Yeah.
It's a bonus.
Yes.
So Robert De Niro comes in and famously or infamously monosyllabic in interviews and so forth, and then somebody else like Michael Bublé, for example, come in and you can't shut him up because he's so full of chat and but it's just a bonus.
Yes, I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I it doesn't come easily, but I do enjoy it. I'm very pleased to be here, and it's lovely to meet readers as well. And I love reading from the work and talking about it. But these are the early events for this book, so I'm surprised by what people are taking from the book and what the questions are.
Your book is called You Are Here.
Yeah.
I always ask for the elevator pitch because so few people will have had the chance to read it yet. So rather than me telling them all about it, why don't you, if you don't mind?
No, of course. It's a love story. It's about two lonely people, Michael and Marnie, who've become a little bit isolated. They've had bad relationships, and they're brought together on a weekend's walking trip to the Lake District. Michael's intention is to walk the famous coast-to-coast path, which goes from St Bees in Cumbria all the way to the Yorkshire coast. And Marnie, who's a Londoner, really doesn't like the outdoors, really is suspicious of nature, really doesn't want to be there. But over the course of the weekend, there's a bond between them, and they decide to keep walking. And it's a love story told on a long walk, with each of the days of the walk representing a different stage of the relationship.
Beautiful. And there's maps there for those of you who like a bit of cartography. It's there too, and it's maps of the human heart as much as geographic landscape.
Yeah.
I presume that's what this is all about.
The metaphor is that the journey represents the journey of the relationship. And I love books that have maps in. I loved researching this book and working out, where do they argue for the first time? Where does he make a laugh for the first time? Where's the lake where they try to swim? So you could bring the novel with you and walk the coast to coast and read it as you go.
What a beautiful way to read the book.
Yeah.
So did you have to decide if there's a row or a making up scene? Did you physically say this is a beautiful spot to do this, or this is a menacing spot to do? I mean, how pathetic fallacy was it?
Yes, there's a lot of pathetic fallacy. There's a terrible moment on the second day where they've set out in pouring rain, and they have to, for those of you who know the lakes, they've got to cross over into the Honister Pass.
I don't know the lakes at all, so bring us with you there as you're saying.
The coast to coast is a lovely walk, and it's not too difficult, but there are 2 or 3 very difficult climbs. Okay. And there's one which is very, very hard in the pouring rain, which is when I did it. Yeah. And so you're doing it and you're thinking, this is horrible, why am I here? And then, of course, you sit down at your word processor and you realize that there's a value in that, and that you have the material. Yeah. And so I don't make notes as I go, but I take a lot of photographs, and I was very keen that I should be able to read the novel and point to a map and say, this is where this dialogue takes place. Yes. And that was part of the fun of writing and researching this.
What I was struck by was also in this book was loneliness.
Yeah.
I think you write loneliness very well, and I'm wondering how much of that came from your own experience of loneliness.
Well, I think it's a universal experience. It's something that everyone feels at some time, even perhaps if they're in a relationship. There are moments where you don't feel that you're communicating, or it's hard to find people to talk to. And I wanted to write about that. At the same time, it's hard to write a novel in which the characters don't communicate. So I suppose the novel is also about the distinction between loneliness, which is a difficult, uncomfortable, sometimes painful state, and solitude, which is what both of the characters are looking for. They want some time by themselves to think. And then they're brought together and forced to communicate, and initially against their will. And that's what brings them out of loneliness. So it's about two lonely people who think that maybe romantic relationships are done, and they're into a different stage of their lives, but they make this discovery on this long walk.
It's funny. Maybe it's the age I'm at 50 now, and I speak to people who feel it's time either to change career or to start winding down.
Yes.
And equally, maybe in relationships, some people say, well, I think I'm done now. I mean, and Marnie's only 38 and she's kind of looking out the window nearly thinking, well, I've got, she's talking to herself. There's a lovely line. How did you describe the playing Scrabble against yourself?
Yes, it's hard to be surprised playing Scrabble by yourself, which is true.
I love that line. She's talking to herself and now the conversation isn't going anywhere. I like playing a Scrabble. Yeah. So, I mean, it's so true.
I mean, I started thinking about this novel in lockdown, and I spent lockdown with my family. So if anything, the problem wasn't solitude. The problem was everyone falling over each other. But I know a lot of people who did spend it by themselves and who found ways to make it, not just bearable, but enjoyable. You read, you watch the films you've always wanted to watch, you do yoga on your television, and there are ways. I didn't want solitude to be the enemy in this novel. Often when you're writing a romantic comedy, solitude is the thing that the characters have to escape from, and I didn't want it to be that. I wanted there to be some value and comfort and pleasure in Marnie's solo life. At the same time, I wanted there to be the hope of connection and the possibility of another romantic relationship at a time when, as you say, both of them have thought, well, that's the end of my romantic life. I'm going to put my energies into something else.
Because there's this sense, isn't there, in life that you can be alone but not lonely. I mean, there's a distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. I once a year or twice a year go on a long walk by myself. I choose to be by myself. There are people who would come with me, but I like having the time to think and listen to music and eat chips and pubs and just walk all day. And that was another of the inspirations for this book, was the pleasure of walking and of solitary thought and the idea of thinking things through, walking things off.
Yeah. And that's, I was just looking here, there's a report in one of the papers today about the keys to happiness.
Right.
And one of them, as you're talking, is get out of your head, point 7. Which is go for a walk in the great outdoors. It helps to deactivate 2 crucial brain regions responsible for monitoring threats and the default mode network associated with mind wandering and planning. So I think what they're trying to say is just go for a long walk. It's not bad for you.
Yeah, and of course it's wonderful in the countryside, but I live in London. I walk nearly everywhere in London now. It doesn't take that much longer, and you see wonderful things and you get time to think, and you're removed from the stress of being crammed onto the tube. And it's for me it's very, very important part of not just recreation but also my working life as well.
You mentioned, I think some of the readers have already got sight of You Are Here. Is that right? Yeah. And what are they saying to you? What are the initial returns?
Oh, it's hard to talk about because it's been so nice. I mean, I'll make myself talk about it.
Embrace with confidence.
I'm going to embrace
because you're quoting somebody else. If you want to,
people have really responded to this one in a way I haven't had since One Day. And
really, in what way? What's the
just
feeling?
Finding it very funny. I wanted to write a proper comedy. I wanted to write a laugh out loud book, but also being moved by it. It's a kind of smaller, gentler book than One Day. It's more of a chamber piece, but people seem to really respond to these characters and like listening to them, spending time on this long walk. And I've also discovered this great love that people have for walking and for the countryside. Marnie in the novel, Marnie in the novel is a little bit skeptical. She needs to be persuaded that this is a good thing to do. Absolutely. So initially she absolutely hates it. And of course there's a comedy in that of not really wanting or loving the great outdoors. But a lot of readers seem to really respond to the landscape and the idea of this great journey as a metaphor for communicating and discovering the pleasure of other people.
It's kind of the first kind of great post-pandemic romantic comedy, if you want to call it that, novel, because you wrote it during it, and there's a real feel of that from the book, in that freedom, nature, loneliness, being alone. It's all there without mentioning in any meaningful way the awfulness.
The original draft had a lot more about the pandemic. It was definitely a post-lockdown novel when I started it, and I wanted to try and capture that awkwardness a lot of us felt when we saw our friends, the inability to communicate, not being quite sure what you're doing with your face and what to say, and the way we all had to relearn social interaction. Marnie really just hasn't gone back out into the world. In the novel, she says it's as if she's returned from a foreign trip and not told anyone. She's become rather reclusive, and I wanted to write about how unnerving and how frightening that can sometimes be. I love my friends, I love my social life, but sometimes there is an element of performance and it can be quite stressful. And Marnie's got trapped in that mode and is finding it hard to communicate. And the novel is her relearning those skills.
As you capture so well. And I suspect that so many people listening today are going, yep, that's me. Tick, 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 tick. David Nicholls, will you stay with us for a few minutes?
Course.
So many places to go.
Great.
So we'll do that after this. Sorry, David, I triggered you there. We were chatting during a Cutting Crew, Dying in Your Arms Now, and we were talking about history books and what I was reading, what you were reading. I said the bad teacher, as I often say, will murder history. A good teacher will bring it alive. You had a bad history teacher.
I did, yes. He was one of those last teachers who used to throw the blackboard rubber. I think you can't get away with that kind of thing now, but he was pretty tough. Yeah.
I didn't feel he was love of the past.
No.
Anyway, David Nicholls joining us in studio today. We're launching his new book, You Are Here, which is just a terrific, insightful book actually on relationships and life and loneliness and love and the Lake District, which is somewhere I don't know, but reading your book I was going, well, now I have a manual.
Absolutely.
To the heart and to the geography. So that's great. Teresa has been on to WhatsApp David saying, question, did you know from the start of how one day, of course, one of your great celebrated books would end? Did you know from the beginning?
Yes, I think there's a way of talking about this without doing spoilers, but I did.
Well, good luck with that.
Yeah, maybe it's too late for that now, but I did. The book started, the premise of the book came from a Thomas Hardy novel, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. There's a passage where she feels a shiver down her spine and wonders if that particular day has a significance of which she is not yet aware, that every year we pass through these days, which will become anniversaries, we just don't know it yet. And that was the starting point for the novel, and so the ending was always built into that. So I do tend to plan my novels quite thoroughly before I write them. I was a TV writer before I was a novelist, and before they let you write the script, they make you break it down into scenes, and I used to do that with my fiction, and so I knew everything that was going to happen to everyone before I write the words chapter 1. So the ending's always there.
It's funny you mentioned Thomas Hardy there. Did he write Far from the Madding Crowd?
Far from the Madding Crowd, I did. And Tess,
also...
I did a Tess adaptation as well for the BBC with Eddie Redmayne and Gemma Arterton many years ago as well. Yeah.
Okay, so this is all in your ether, these classic writers.
I was talking about this. I think often the books you study for O level or A level, they just get inside you in a way that you can't anticipate. and all of the books that I studied have found their way into my own work. So I'm very grateful to them.
You were saying during the song as well. Obviously, we didn't pay too much attention to Cutting Crew today, but because we were chatting. But you were saying that you loved to have almost like a Spotify playlist of books. Tell me about that.
Well, I guess that often when I'm writing a novel, I start with a mood as much as a story or characters. So so for instance, the last novel, Sweet Sorrow, was about, I wanted to write something that was about when summer edges into autumn, the turning of the leaves, the feeling you have at 16. It's a coming of age story when you realize that you're going to have to face up to adulthood. And there are lots of books that deal with that. So I thought a lot about LP Hartley's The Go-Between.
Right, we were talking about that too.
A wonderful heady summer love story, and the works of J.D. Salinger, and I always think about Great Expectations by Charles Dickens because he's so good
also,
about I mean he's so good on class and unrequited love and aspiration and coming of age, and so I have a pile of sort of touchstones, almost a kind of, it sounds pretentious, but a kind of literary mood board for what I want to write. And I just have them around me and dip into them, and that helps me work through my own ideas.
It works for you, and it's working for all of us as readers of your books too, which is terrific. One Day is 15 years old.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How do you feel about the Netflix series in terms of how successful it's been? Suddenly One Day, for a whole other generation, came blasting back into the consciousness, didn't it?
Yeah, I'm phenomenally lucky. I mean, phenomenally lucky to have had it made, and phenomenally lucky to have it made by such brilliant people. I only wrote one episode. I let other writers take on board the scripts. A brilliant writer called Nicole Taylor did most of the work with a fantastic team. I love the cast. I love the directors, and it was very, very enjoyable and satisfying, and a great experience for me. And even if no one had watched or picked up the book, it would have been a lovely time. But the fact that it's been returned to in this way is a great surprise and a privilege, and I'm very, very thankful to everyone who's picked it up since.
Well, we have to go. Alas, I have about 55 million questions here that I would put to you, but for another day, David Nicholls, what a pleasure to see you. Good luck to your kids and their exams. I know
yes, it's coming up.
It's coming up. Like another nervous dad in the house, but good luck with that. Anyone who loved One Day, anyone who loved Starter for 10, anyone who loved us will simply adore your new book, You Are Here. Congratulations.
Thank you
another cracker of a read for other people are going to love, and it's been really nice to talk to you today. Thanks for your
great
time.
To meet you. Thank you.
Back shortly.